Scrolling back to 1855, with dresses like this and suits like that. It's also the birth year of this man, William Mulholland. Mulholland was born in Belfast, Ireland, to his parents Hugh and Ellen Mulholland. His younger brother was born in 1856 and named Hugh Jr. After allegedly being beaten by his father at the age of 15 for bad marks in school, he joined the British Merchant Marine, also known as the Merchant Navy, a non-military service. Think tanker ships, ferries, and cruise ships. He spent 4 years as a sailor. On June 9, 1874, Mulholland sailed into New York Harbor and then remained in the United States. After he decided to stay, he worked a few odd jobs that summer, working as a deckhand and then a lumberjack. After injuring his leg, he gave up being a lumberjack and worked as an assistant to an itinerant mechanic, kind of like a traveling mechanic. He met up with his brother Hugh Jr. in the fall of 1875. Together they looked for their uncle in Pennsylvania, Richard Deekers. At the time, he was living in Pittsburgh and operated a successful store. The Mulholland brothers were accepted into the family and helped run the store for 2 years, until the family decided to relocate to Southern California to avoid a wave of tuberculosis that was running rampant through Pittsburgh at the time. He arrived in Los Angeles with his brother in 1877. At the time, LA only had a population of about 9,000 people, compared to the 3.84 million that it is today. William had originally decided to work as a sailor, but on his way to San Pedro, he was offered a job digging a well, and he accepted. After a brief time in Arizona, where he prospected for gold and accepted a job as a deputy zinjero with a newly formed Los Angeles Water Company, or the LAWC. He worked his way up the ranks, leaving briefly and then returning just as quickly to work other jobs for water companies. By October 1886, he had become naturalized American citizen, and by October of that year, he became the superintendent of the Los Angeles Water Company. After work, would study math books and textbooks on hydraulics and geology, teaching himself engineering and geology. Los Angeles had a land boom in 1886, where the population increased from 10,000 to 50,000 people in a little less than 3 years. Due to the increased population, the demand for water increased greatly. Frederick Eden worked with Mulholland at the Los Angeles Water Company as the city engineer. In 1889, Frederick Eden was elected mayor of Los Angeles. He was also Mulholland's roommate. He favored the formation of a city-run water company to replace the Los Angeles Water Company. The city's population stood at 100,000 people, and he firmly believed that its future water requirements wouldn't be able to be met with the existing water sources in Southern California. The city of Los Angeles succeeded in buying the LAWC, and Mulholland was kept on as the superintendent due to his vast knowledge of the water system. They both recognized the increased need for water as the population grew. Together, they realized that there was a lot of runoff from the Sierra Nevada in Owens Valley, and it could be fed to Los Angeles by gravity-fed aqueduct. According to Mark Reisner in his book, Cadillac Desert, he says, quote, "From 1902 to 1905, Eaton, Mulholland, and others engaged in underhanded methods to ensure that Los Angeles would gain the water rights in the Owens Valley, blocking the Bureau of Reclamation from building water infrastructure for the residents in Owens Valley. While Eaton engaged in most of the political maneuverings and chicanery, Mulholland misled Los Angeles' public opinion by dramatically understating the amount of water then available for Los Angeles' growth. Mulholland also misled residents of Owens Valley. He indicated that Los Angeles would only use unused flows in the Owens Valley, while planning on using the full water rights to fill the aquifer of the San Fernando Valley." End quote. So they were both pretty driven and were willing to do some underhanded things to get this going, regardless of who it hurt. In 1906, Mulholland was appointed chief engineer, and in 1908, construction began. After requiring up to 3,900 workers and digging 164 tunnels, on November 5, 1913, water from the Owens River made it to the reservoir in the San Fernando Valley via the Los Angeles Aqueduct. At the ceremony that day, Mulholland spoke his famous words about this engineering feat. "There it is, take it." Wow, what a guy. However, without the additional water, the population of LA would have never been able to grow beyond 500,000 people. That was the maximum capacity of the water systems at the time. Because of this and the general success of the aqueduct, Mulholland received lots of recognition from the general public and members of the engineering community, because at the time it was the longest aqueduct in the world. It was completed on time, under budget, and is still in operation today. Even by today's standards, on time and under budget is a rarity. This popularity of the aqueduct gave Mulholland the credentials to take on a bigger project, such as the Mulholland Dam. Construction started in August 1923 and was completed a little more than a year later in December 1924. It was a concrete gravity dam, designed by Mulholland and built by the Bureau of Waterworks and Supply. It is still intact today, with some modifications I'll get into later. During the process of building the aqueduct, Mulholland first noticed sections of the San Francisco Canyon as possible locations of a dam. He felt that there should be a reservoir big enough to serve Los Angeles for an extended period of time in the event of a drought, or if something happened to the aqueduct, like an earthquake. Mulholland had actually concluded that a particular section of the canyon was unsuitable for a dam. The rock below the area was unstable and susceptible to earthquakes. He wrote about the unstable nature of the rock in his annual report to the Board of Public Works in 1911. This section of the report was either ignored or misjudged by the construction supervisor of the St. Francis Dam, Stanley Dunham. Stanley Dunham later testified at the coroner's inquest that tests which he had ordered had results which showed the rock to be hard and to be solid throughout the entire area. His opinion was that this area was more than suitable. He'd come to eat those words later. Los Angeles' population had skyrocketed from 100,000 people in 1900 to 576,000 people in 1920. The unexpected rapid growth meant that there was a higher demand for a larger water supply. Modifications were made to the San Fernando Reservoir, but Los Angeles would soon outgrow it. The original site for the dam was to be in the Big Tujunga Canyon, the northeast part of the San Fernando Valley. However, there was high asking prices of the land and ranches in the area, and were seen by Mulholland as a holdup of the city. He quit attempting to buy the land and either forgot or decided to ignore his previous reservations of the area in the San Francisco Canyon. For the St. Francis Dam, they decided to use the same specifications. It was nearly dimensionally identical to the Mulholland Dam, with only minor modifications made to fit the site. David J. Rogers in his article says, quote, "In describing the shape and type of the St. Francis Dam, the word curved is used. Although, by today's standards, due to the amount of curve in its radius, the dam would have been considered arch, therefore making it of the arch gravity design. It was not so called because the science of arch gravity dams was still in its infancy. Little was known in the engineering community about the arch effect, how it worked, and how loads were transmitted, other than it did help with stability and support. As such, the dam was designed without any additional benefits given by the arch action, which led to its profile being considered conservative, given its size." End quote. So they knew that arches were beneficial, but lacked the knowledge and understanding of the premise to commit to the design. The dam became a jack of all trades, master of none. Early calculations for a reservoir created by the dam revealed that it would have a capacity of approximately 30,000 acres of water. On July 1st, 1924, Office Engineer W.W. Hurlburt informed him that all the preliminary work of the dam had been completed. Mulholland submitted his annual report saying that the dam would have a capacity of 32,000 acres due to the preliminary digging and trenches. Construction of the dam started 5 weeks later. Later, the size would again be increased to 38,000 acres of capacity due to changes in plans, increasing the height above sea level by 10 feet. The extra 10 feet added required a 588-foot wing dike along the top ridge in order to contain the enlarged reservoir. The St. Francis Dam was completed on May 12, 1926. As the dam filled, a few minor cracks began to form from temperature and contraction, and a minor amount of seepage began. The most notable incident was 2 vertical cracks that ran through the dam from the top. Mulholland and his assistant, chief engineer, and general manager, Harvey Van Norman, inspected the cracks and decided that they were within expectation of a concrete dam the size of St. Francis. At the beginning of April, the water level reached the fault line in the western edge. Seepage began almost immediately. Workers were ordered to seal the leak, but they were not entirely successful, and water continued to pour through. By the end of April, water level was brought within 10 feet of the spillway. In May, the level was in 3 feet of overflowing in the spillway. 8,000 liters were taken out by the city due to the aqueduct needing repairs. Once it was back in commission, the reservoir filled back up. In 1927, a fracture was noticed which began at the western edge and ran diagonally upwards. As with other cracks, Mulholland inspected it and ordered it to be filled. At the same time, another fracture appeared on the eastern edge. It too was ordered to be filled. The water levels continued to rise until February 1928, when the water level was within 1 foot of the top spillway. Several new cracks appeared in the wind dike, and a notable leak was found leaking 17 liters a second, or 4.5 gallons. This was one of 2 inspected by Mulholland. This is 3 times now that he concluded that it was within normal range and left it open to drain. In the first week of March, the leak had nearly doubled due to erosion. In March, the reservoir had to be filled 3 inches below the spillway, and Mulholland ordered that no more water be added. 5 days later, on March 12, the dam keeper, Tony Harschenfeger, discovered a new leak in the western edge. Concerned because leaks had appeared in the area before, but also because the water was muddy, possibly indicating that the leak was eroding the foundation of the dam. He alerted Mulholland. After arriving, both him and his assistant Van Norman began inspecting the area of the leak. It was discharging between 58 to 85 liters a second, or 15 to 22 gallons per second approximately. They both concluded that it needed to be fixed, but could be done sometime in the future. They both left after the inspection, noting nothing out of the ordinary for a dam the size of Francis. Ace Hopwell, a carpenter at Powerhouse No. 1, rode past the dam on his motorcycle 10 minutes before midnight, seeing nothing out of the ordinary. Approximately 2 kilometers later, he could hear a rumbling sound over the sound of his engine. He thought it was a landslide, which is common to the area, and paid it no mind. He was the last person to see the dam intact and survive. 2 minutes before midnight, on March 12, 1928, the dam failed. 5 minutes after the collapse, a 120-foot wave traveled 2 kilometers and destroyed Powerhouse No. 2, killing 64 of the 67 workmen and their families that lived nearby. This cut power to most of Los Angeles and the San Fernando Valley temporarily, with power getting restored by the Southern California Edison Company. At 12:40 a.m., their main lines were destroyed, redarkening the areas that had previously lost power. 1 a.m. The mass of water that at this point was 55 feet high followed the riverbed west and demolished Edison's Saugus substation. This cuts power from the entire Santa Clara River Valley and parts of Ventura and Oxnard. The flood entered the San Clarita Valley at 19 kilometers an hour. 5 miles downstream, there was a temporary construction camp the Edison Company had set up for its 150-man crew. In the confusion, Edison personnel had been unable to issue a warning, and 84 workers perished. Shortly before 1:30 a.m., the Santa Clara River Valley telephone operator learned that the dam had failed. She called a motorcycle officer with the State Motor Division and began calling all of the homes of those in danger. The flood heavily damaged the towns of Fillmore, Bardstown, and Santa Paula before emptying into the Pacific Ocean, including debris and victims. At this time, the wave was 3 kilometers wide and was still traveling at 10 kilometers an hour. The dam keeper, Harschenfeger, and his family were most likely one of the first casualties caught in the 140-foot flood wave. Their cottage was 400 meters downstream from the dam. The body of the woman who lived with the family was found wedged between 2 rocks near the base, leading to believe that she and Harschenfeger may have been inspecting it right before the failure of the dam. Harschenfeger's body and the body of his 6-year-old son were never found. There were a total of 224 identified deaths, 60 of whom were never identified, and 101 people reported missing, bringing the total to 385 deaths. Although this number has been increased over the years as bodies are continually found, the death toll is now estimated to be 431. Smithsonian Magazine article on the matter says, quote, Universal Studios donated spotlights so rescue crews could work through the night. The LA Times set up a flood relief fund. The city of Los Angeles set aside $1 million to help treat, feed, and shelter the survivors. When it became national news, aid came in as far as Savannah, Georgia. After the disaster, there were multiple investigations into the matter. 8 had begun by the weekend following the collapse. Many of them quickly reached conclusions and submitted reports before the coroner's inquest, which was the only one that took into consideration factors other than geology and engineering. At the time, the Johnson Bill was in Congress. This bill was in Congress for the third time. It was the bill to secure funding for the Hoover Dam. Although the power and water would be generated was needed, the design of the dam was of similar design that would create a reservoir 700 times larger than St. Francis. The Governor's Commission was first to release its conclusion, titled Report of Commission appointed by Governor C.C. Young to investigate the causes leading to the failure of St. Francis Dam near Saugus, California. Wow, you guys really couldn't shorten it. The West End, the commission stated, was found upon the reddish conglomerate which, even when dry, was of decidedly inferior strength, and which, when wet, became so soft that most of it lost almost all rock characteristics. J. David Rogers in 1995 investigated the scenario. He attributed the failure to three major factors: the instability of the ancient landslide material on which the dam was built, the failure to compensate for the additional height added on to the dam's design, and the design and construction being overseen by only one person. At the coroner's inquest, the leak that Tony the damkeeper spotted was taken as evidence that the dam was leaking on the day of the break, and that Mulholland was aware of it. He told the jury that he had been there that day, but didn't see anything of concern. During this inquest, he said the more famous line, quote, "This inquest is a very painful thing for me to have to attend, but it is the occasion of it that is painful. The only ones I envy about this thing are the ones who are dead," end quote. He also added, quote, "Whether it is good or bad, don't blame it on anyone else. You just fasten it to me. If there was an error in human judgment, I was the human. I won't try to fasten it on anyone else," end quote. Which is more accountability than we will get from anyone, especially those at fault. At the end of the inquest, Mulholland was cleared of any criminal culpability, but the, quote, "error on engineering judgment that the coroner's inquest concluded landed on his shoulders." In response to the disaster, the California legislature updated the dam safety program. Since up until this point, a municipality having its own engineering program was exempt from regulation. In 1929, the Department of Public Works was given the authority to review all non-federal dams over 20 feet high, or which would hold 50 acres of water. For reference, the St. Francis Dam held 38,000 acres of water. They also determined that having unregulated design of construction projects constituted a hazard to the public. They passed laws to regulate civil engineering and created the Board of Registration for Civil Engineers. This actually ended up creating a ripple effect throughout the United States, making more regulations on civil engineers throughout all of the states. That the dam lacked proper support, which could lead to a similar disaster. So they decided to keep the dam, but to make sure it was never filled with more than 4,000 acres of water, and that the dam would be bolstered with over 330,000 cubic yards of earth to increase its resistance to hydraulic uplift and earthquake forces. Mulholland went from being loved and revered by getting more water to the growing city to people putting up signs on their houses that read, "Kill Mulholland." Currently, it remains the biggest civil engineering disaster in history. He ended up being exonerated in 1995 when J. David Rogers, as previously mentioned, investigated the incident. He wrote in his book, The St. Francis Dam Disaster Revisited, that, quote, "The dam had been partially built on an ancient landslide site, which shifted under the massive weight of the dam. Considering the technology at the time, there was no way he or any of the people working for him would have known about this," end quote. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this side project for me. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe.